Welcome everyone to another spotlight here with Equality ENC. I'm so excited to have with us a legal giant with us for this spotlight. For everyone at home, I'm Eleazar Posada. I am the director for organizing here at Equality ENC. I use he, him pronouns, and it's my distinct honor to have Justice Ervin with us this afternoon. Justice, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. It's 2.5 weeks before an election, and I'm running around trying to do all the things that one does, 2 weeks out from an election. But I'm doing fine. Other than that, I'm glad you are.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. So before we get started and talk about the issues in your campaign, do you want to take a moment to introduce yourself to our audience? A little bit about who you are, why you decided to run, and why you're running for re-election now.
Okay. Well, for those that are not familiar with me, I'm Sam Ervin IV. I'm currently an associate justice with the North Carolina Supreme Court. Have been serving in that capacity since January of 2015. I'm a native of a small town in western North Carolina known as Morganton. It's about an hour between Winston-Salem and Asheville. I've lived here all my life except for when I was off in college and in law school. I'm a product of the public school system in Burke County. My mother was a public school history teacher. My father was a lawyer, state superior court judge, and federal appellate judge. I went to Davidson College for my undergraduate education, graduated from there with a magna cum laude in 1978. Got my law degree from Harvard Law School with cum laude in 1981, and then did what was fairly unusual for my classmates at Harvard at that time. I came back to Morganton to practice law and practiced here in Morganton for almost 18 years, did a general practice that involved a little bit of just about everything, but most of what I did involved going to court in some kind of capacity. Over time, I developed I wouldn't say a specialty, but I tended to concentrate my work more in the area of all things utility regulation. The Utilities Commission is an agency that regulates the rates and service provided by privately owned utilities, which now are electric, natural gas, water, sewer, and home moving companies. Did a lot of that for the period of time I was in private practice. In 1999, Governor Hunt appointed me to the Utilities Commission, and I served on the commission for almost a decade. Was appointed to a second term. I did not complete serving that term because in 2008 I ran for the Court of Appeals and was elected to the court that year, and served on the Court of Appeals from 2009 until I took office at the Supreme Court following my election to that body. And the election was in 2014, and I took office in 2015. So that's kind of a bit of my background. I still live in Morganton. I try to be active in my community. Among the things that I do to entertain myself or maybe others enjoy hiking in the mountains. I referee high school, middle school, and age group soccer matches, and I'm voraciously read history and other things of that nature. I'm married. I've got 2 stepchildren and a couple of children of my own.
So, wow, no, thank you so much for your many years of service and your continued service on our court, and wanting to hopefully get you back on that court, make sure that you continue to serve.
I'd certainly like to continue to work there, because I tell people that's up to several million of my nearest and dearest friends in the electorate.
I love it. I love it. So as you're running for office and you're continuing to talk to folks across the state, right? This is the statewide election. You have been
very, very much so.
Yes, you have been all over the state having conversations with folks. What are some of the things you're hearing that are issues that people are seeing when it concerns the criminal justice system? And when you get elected or reelected back to the Supreme Court, what are some things that you can address from the bench?
Well, and see, that's we get asked that kind of question a lot. And I think one of the things that I wind up having to talk about a great deal in these conversations is to explain that, unlike members of a legislative body like the General Assembly or Congress, or unlike executive branch officials like the governor or the president, we don't get to pick what we decide. I mean, if you're elected to one of those kinds of offices, what you're supposed to do is look around, see what you see in the community and the world around you, identify the problems that you think need to be addressed, figure out a solution for those problems, and then try to get that solution implemented by either adoption into law or through administrative action. So it's a proactive, those are proactive kinds of positions. Our positions are reactive. What we do is we decide cases that are initially brought into the court system by other people. Sometimes in most of them are, I hesitate to say that anything is routine, but sort of more traditional types of litigation, criminal cases where the state charges someone with committing a crime and seeks to punish that person. Business disputes, disputes over wills, disputes over estates, disputes over contracts, land disputes, tort cases, automobile accidents, medical malpractice or legal malpractice claims, fraud allegations. Very wide range of things, but all of those cases come to us because somebody filed a charge or a civil complaint in the trial courts. And so the court system has to take what it gets because we are the dispute resolution agency within the government. Now, certainly by the time a case gets to my court, there certainly is some selectivity in what we can hear. Some kinds of cases come to us directly. If a person's convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death, that person's appeal comes from the superior court to our court. We have a body in the state called the business court, which is a specialized superior court. Appeals from that court come directly from the business court to our court. Interestingly, given my background, what is called a general rate case, which is a case in which a utility company seeks to increase its profit level, comes to the directly from the Utilities Commission to the Supreme Court. So we get those cases automatically. Any other appeal, for the most part, goes through the Court of Appeals, which is the intermediate appellate court in North Carolina. They decide cases using 3 judges. If the 3 judges assigned to a particular case don't agree, then the party that didn't prevail in that case has the right to ask us to hear it, and we have to hear it at least to the extent that we resolve the dispute between the 3 judges of the Court of Appeals. And finally, and this is where selectivity does come in, if the Court of Appeals decides a case unanimously, then the parties in that case that don't like the outcome have the right to ask us in the exercise of our discretion to hear it. And we grant some of those, but the majority of them are denied. So we do have some ability to pick what we decide, but for the most part, what cases we hear come to us essentially without any screening process on our part. In those cases, and I've sort of outlined the kinds of cases that we got. And so in the future, if I'm on the court starting in January 1 again, we will continue to hear that type of case in the future. And they range from, I think I've heard a number of cases that started out as criminal misdemeanor cases. I've heard certainly murder cases, serious sex crime cases, things like that, business court cases, other civil cases, and then the constitutional type cases that we get the most publicity for, but that's actually a relatively small part of our overall workload. And so, when we're asked and we're given the ability to pick cases, what we're supposed to do is look and see if one, that case it has significant public interest. In other words, is it important to the public at large? Does it involve a significant legal issue? In other words, is there an issue out there that the law is unclear about and it needs clarification? Or lastly, has the Court of Appeals made a decision that's inconsistent in a specific way with one of our decisions? And so we can pick, if a case meets that criteria, we can elect to take it. If it doesn't meet those criteria, we're not supposed to. But we can't say there are issues out there that I'm going to make sure that I address in my future work, because until the briefs and records, calendars sent out and the briefs and records arrive in my office, I don't know what cases I'm going to decide. And that's one of the things that makes us very different than the other branches of government. There are others, but that's one of them.
Yeah, no, thank you for that clarification and answer, because we do.
Well, it's not anything that most people have any familiarity with, and therefore it's not surprising that the average citizen doesn't know those things, because that's not really explained in media coverage of the court, and it's not intuitively obvious. People who look and say this is a court, It makes decisions. Everybody picks what they decide. Therefore, you guys could probably do that. And we don't.
No, and like I said, thank you for that clarification, because that is very important as we're talking to community members across the state to understand the importance of the Supreme Court and also what the court can do. And so one of the things that we consistently ask, you are an endorsed candidate for Quality and C.
Right. Which I appreciate. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for all the work you're doing. And part of our endorsement process is identifying folks who understand the importance of being an ally, right? Understand what it means to support and want to see equality and equity in our state. So for folks, what is your why would you say that it's important for folks to be allies, and how would you pursue equality in the courts?
Well, and again, because of what I outlined earlier, we typically don't say we take policy positions with respect to the types of issues that are decided by the General Assembly, for example. And so to the use of the word ally with respect to the courts needs to have really a different meaning than it would be if you were talking to somebody running for Congress or running for the General Assembly. What it seems to me that everybody is entitled to, and what everybody has not always gotten in the past. I mean, look at the history of the African American community, for example, in the state over many decades. What we strive for in the court system and what judges ought to be focused on is making sure that everyone's legal rights are protected, that people are not treated differently on the basis of any number of a range of characteristics, and you can probably rattle off all of them just like I can, and that it is important that every citizen of the state and every person who resides within the state can be confident that if they wind up in some type of legal proceeding, that the case is going to be decided not on the basis of who they are, but what they did and what may have happened, because we cannot have a society that operates under law if the nature of the decision and the outcome varies depending upon who the person is. And so to me, the central obligation of any judge is to make sure that after you figure out what the law means, that you apply it equally to everybody. Because if you don't do that, then we live in a and I don't mean this in the Wild West sense, but we live in a literally lawless society, because law assumes that the rules are equally applicable to everybody. And if they're not, we're not following the law. And so any person, I think any member of the community that we're talking about today, the LGBTQ community, I'm tongue-tied all of a sudden, the LGBTQ community ought to be confident that any judge that hears a case in which they are involved is going to be fair, is going to be impartial, is not going to let who they are or their sexual orientation or any other characteristic affect the outcome of that case. That case will be decided on the basis of the law and the facts and nothing else. It doesn't mean that a member of any particular community is entitled to have their case decided in a specific way. What it means is that they are entitled to have their position heard, listened to, seriously considered, and that at the end of the day, the decision is an equal application of the law to everybody, regardless of who they are. And so that's what I think that the community, the LGBTQ community ought to be able to, sorry to keep stumbling over my words today, ought to be able to expect from me and from any other judge. And I try very hard to make sure that I live up to the goal that I set for myself. Other people can determine whether I actually do that or not. None of us is the best judge of our own work, but that's the goal that we strive for every day. And that's the goal that I personally strive for every day.
No, and we're very thankful for all the work you've been doing and continue to do on the court. We are in the middle of early voting. November 1st is November 8th is fast approaching.
And I would encourage everybody that sees this, regardless of how you vote, to please go vote. That's a fundamental civic obligation, and we don't always carry out our obligation in that area. And so regardless of how you're going to vote, please go vote.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that we want to do is also highlight ways folks can get involved with their campaign. So, as we wind down, what are some ways that folks can either interact with your campaign, or what are some of the needs of your campaign as folks are preparing themselves for this last push?
Well, in at least, the answer to that question varies based upon, what stage of the campaign that you're at. And right now, as you've already pointed out, we're in early voting. And the main thing that needs to happen in any campaign now, not just mine, but others, is to make sure that people do what I just urged them to do a minute ago, which is to go vote themselves. And for better or worse, some people are more self-motivated to go vote than others are. And therefore, it's important. One of the principal things that anybody wishing to help a campaign do is to try to help with the ensuring that as many people vote as possible, and with persuading them to vote in ways that the person thinks would be appropriate. And so the main thing that campaigns need right now are people to engage in voter turnout activities, and then to the extent that any persuasion activities occur, typically that's done either through phone banking or in polling places. And obviously each individual campaign has vastly different resources. Judicial campaigns tend to be a little bit on the inexpensive end of the campaign world, but there are certainly ways that folks can become involved in phone banking, get out the vote types of activities, either within organizations like Equality ENC or through the efforts that are being put together by political parties or larger campaigns. And so that's the principal thing folks can do now. Because of the fact that we're in early voting and people tend to focus most of their activities on get out the vote campaigns, the number of campaign events is actually declining right now. And so even though I've got a few fundraising events left, most of my running around the state to various places is actually coming to an end, because the people are focused on what I said they ought to be focused on, not listening to candidates themselves. And so that's a long-winded way of saying I would encourage anybody that wants to help my campaign or anybody else's campaign for that matter, to get involved in local get out the vote efforts that include handing out things at polling places, providing transportation for voters, calling voters, reminding them to vote, going door to door, handing things out. That's the type of effort that's really significant now. We pretty much raised the money. My campaign is, we'll be trying to raise it up till the last minute, but we've probably raised the vast bulk of the money that we're going to raise. And so now we're in the middle of spending it in ways that help communicate our message out there. And the individuals' activities, at least to me, are best focused on the kinds of things that I said.
Yeah, no, and we are going to continue to encourage folks to make a plan to vote, make sure that they're going out there and early voting, taking a friend, taking a family member. If you want to phone bank or canvas with us, please join Equality ENC as we we phone bank and canvas for so many of our endorsed candidates, knowing this is an extremely important election. So Justice Ervin, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Thank you for all the work you're doing. And for everyone watching at home, make sure that you're making a plan to vote. You're bringing your friends, you're bringing your family, so we can make sure that we continue to make this state, North Carolina, much better by re-electing folks like Justice Ervin. So, Justice, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Well, thank you for having me today. And you know how to get in touch with my campaign. If anybody has any questions, comments, or concerns, I would encourage you to direct them to Eleazar, and then he can get them to us. I view any relationship that I have with any voter as an ongoing one. And so if I've said anything that stimulates further questions that you would like to try to lateral to us, please feel free to do what I just said, and we'll try to get back with you, or I'll try to get back with you as quick as we can.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much. And we'll see you out in November.
All right. Thank you very much. Nice to see you, and thank you for having me on.